was actually pretty good. Can I give it a second? Hi, guys. Great, so like Oliver said, I work at Shopify, not Spotify. I get that a lot. I wrote a book called Tragic Design, and today I will not make a mini version of my book because guess what? I want you to buy my book. So, same topic, different examples. And ideally, if you buy it, read it. I've got a lot of, I have your book. I haven't read it though, but I've got it. I'm like, oh, cool. So let's start this. In design school, we studied great designs in hopes of creating our own. And if we're lucky, we had like a single class on user experience. It was 3 hours long. And if you're lucky, the teacher called this human-computer interaction. And after school, we select the very best work that we've done, and we put it in our portfolio. We dump the rest, the not good stuff, into an archive folder, with the hope that no one ever sees this again. And if you're like me, you even rename that archive folder to something completely irrelevant to make sure that no one sees that, even by mistake. Fortunately, this bad work is easily forgotten and forgiven. No user will have to deal with the consequences of the very bad design decisions that you've made as a student. But by allowing us to forget and forgive our bad design decisions, our teachers and mentors are not helping us. They're actually making us a disservice. They are not teaching us that as designers, we have great power and great responsibilities. Quoting Spider-Man or Spider-Man Uncle, depending if you're into comic books or movies. I'm quite sick of seeing that quote. I actually see it all the time. So, what happens to bad design decisions in the real world, like not in school? What's worse than a B- or C-, depending on your standards? Most of us assume that worse than average design is ugly. And actually, ugly is not that bad. If you look at the top 50 websites, e-commerce websites, they all share one thing is ugliness. Humble opinion. Sorry, hopefully no one worked on that. No one dies of ugliness. So you shouldn't be afraid of innovating and trying out new stuff because you're afraid of something turning out ugly or not being in style or whatever. There are way other means and ways that design can actually affect people negatively. Design can actually be hostile, and in order to explain what hostile design is, I need to talk a little bit about affordance. I'm gonna do that quite quickly. I'm assuming you guys have a clear understanding of what that is. So if a shape could talk, affordance is what it would tell you. So for example, this would tell you that it's a triangle. This would tell you that it's a rectangle. So far, so good. But if you magically added drop shadow and rounded corners, all of a sudden this rectangle is begging you to press it. So when something is affordable, it doesn't need instructions. Video games are all about affordance. When you played Mario, you just knew that you could jump on Koopa Troopa, the little turtle, because it had a rounded back. Like, it wouldn't hurt you. You wouldn't die by jumping on it. In fact, I know that you didn't need instructions, because who here has played Mario? Show of hand. Really? Some people haven't played? Ever? I think that's legit the first time that happened, or they have like 2 coffees in their hand or something. Blown away, sorry for the I don't know, I thought that was a pretty easy reference. Okay. So I know like of everyone that raised their hands, who has read the instructions? Who knew that there was like an instruction booklet? Collectors type of thing. So if you had read the instructions, you would know that actually Lil Goomba, that's his name, is a mushroom that betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom. And that Koopa Troopa was, and I quote, a soldier of the Turtle Empire, and his orders are to find and destroy Mario. Wow. So affordance is obviously not only a digital concept. The same way that you knew that you should not touch Spinny, you know that you should not touch a hedgehog, or anything with spikes, for that matter. And hedgehogs, they don't come with instructions. They don't need instructions because their form carries meaning. And they don't need instructions because that kitten cannot read. Usually I keep talking and people stop listening to me. That's adorable. So they don't need instructions, and instructions would be useless because kittens can't read. So knowing that, would you sleep on this bench? Or any of these? I know that, well, sorry, too quick, back. I know that I wouldn't have to sleep on these. I wouldn't sleep on this bench, but it's a good thing because I don't have to, because I have a very comfortable bed that is waiting for me at home. These benches were created to restrict its access to a certain caste of people that would use them to sleep on them. When a designer uses affordance in order to shape, interfere, or restrict a way a certain class of people interact with their object, this is called hostile design. These objects that controls who gets to use them are quite bad. And it's easy to say that it's a lack of empathy that comes from the designer. But in reality, it just mirrors the situation we're in. The designer is commissioned by a client, internal or external. And this client has objectives that are not always perfectly aligned with the user's best interests. In these cases, the role of the designer is to represent all of the users and to advocate for their needs, but it's hard. So hostile design might be a lack of empathy, but that lack of empathy does not come from the designer very often. So introducing my first rule. So I have 10 rules on how not to kill people with design. First is to recognize that design is a powerful tool. Environmental tool, political tool, and a social tool. Just gonna pose a little bit. Yeah, you can take a shot. So hostile design exists on the web as well, as you probably guess, and on the web we call it dark patterns. A dark pattern is a user interface that is carefully crafted to trick someone into doing something that they might not have done otherwise. So it is bad design, but when you think usually as bad design, you think of a lousy designer, a lazy designer, a designer that lacks skills. But dark patterns are actually not a lack of skill. They're carefully crafted with a solid understanding of human psychology actually behind it. So this example, like you don't have to read the whole thing because it's super confusing anyway. It actually says that if you do not want to receive any information, you need to tick the relevant boxes. And in the second one, it says that if you do want to receive them, you need to tick the relevant boxes. So if you tick all of them, you receive everything, and if you untick all of them, you receive everything. So I think that if you do not want to receive something, you have to tick them and not tick those. It's super confusing. That is called a trammel net. A trammel net is when you go fishing, it has like 2 different sizes of holes in it, and if the fish makes it through the first layer, it will not make it through the second one. So there's obviously a bunch of different examples of dark patterns. I'm sure you guys know about them and have seen them around. But why are they used? If we all agree that they're shitty, and all designers kind of care about their users, why do we see them? That's because they work. This kind of design that betrays the user trust for a short-term goal is wrong and a bad business strategy in the long term. When we design with a single metric in mind, and you try to optimize with everything that you've got for that single metric, this is when dark patterns make sense. For example, when you force an item into a cart, it might be a good idea to raise the average value of a cart. But it's easy to think that in the long run, this will hurt your business and is actually a really bad idea. For example, you just lost the opportunity to actually make a case for selling that item legitimately. Or that person might be really upset and complain on social media. And this is really hard, actually, to put a number on. They might call to your customer service, and if you know anything about customer service, every call is actually very costly. They might actually return something, and if you know anything about retail, you know that returning stuff actually costs sometimes even more than the cost of the thing itself. So when you zoom out and look in perspective, usually they're bad business moves. But if that zoom out technique doesn't work to convince your client that you should not design a dark pattern, try the money. The money works. It's a good argument. So LinkedIn recently was fined $13 million for sending emails that were horrible. You remember, like, you're sending emails? Well, LinkedIn was sending emails on your behalf to your friends, and you didn't even really know that they were doing it. I know I was caught, and I sent emails to, like, my uncle, and he was super confused. So they were fined $13 million in a class action lawsuit. Also, in Canada, we have a new, well, not new anymore, but we have a recent law that prevents people sending emails to users if they have not explicitly consent to it. So Kellogg was fined $60,000, and Porter was fined $150,000 for doing that. So rule number 2, don't resign to turning to compromises. If you are stuck implementing a dark pattern because in the end, your client decides so, your boss decides so, or you were just stuck in that situation that you've done it, don't resign to always do it. Next time, you should come with a renewed energy for not implementing it and with new arguments. Rule number 3, define your own ethical code. This code, I have one, you should have one. There's this starving ethical code, the ethical code of the starving designer is actually a good start. This code should list all the things that you are not willing to compromise on. It should also list the companies that you are not willing to work for, no matter how much they're willing to pay you. For example, like, I personally would not feel comfortable working for a gun company unless it was to make educational tool or maybe safety measures. But that's me. So hostile design might make people lose some money, some time, energy, but they're not the worst that design can do. Design can actually be cruel. And there are multiple ways that design can be cruel, but the first is by using inadvertently cruel algorithms. So in December, 3 years ago, Facebook launched a year in review app. You guys remember? I see some faces that go like that right now. They know where I'm going. So to increase engagement, they automatically created a holiday-themed slideshow that was pre-populated with images from your feed. And in order to know which one was the image that was going to go in the slideshow, they selected the one that had the largest amount of likes. What's the worst that could happen? While they had good intentions in mind, they made a mistake of designing for the 90 or 95% of the population that had a good year that they actually wanted to be reminded of. For people that have experienced loss or grief or pain, this just served as a hurtful reminder forced upon them. Here's what your year looked like, with streamers and balloons and people dancing around the face of your deceased daughter, or your apartment burning down, No one at Facebook had bad intention in mind. And I have met actually 2 people that worked on that team, the content strategist lead on that team, and a designer. And the assumption that we all have right now is exactly what happened. They were like, oh, it's going to be pretty good for everyone. Some people might have a bad year, but they'll understand why it happened that way. While everyone understands why that picture makes it to the top, it's still hurtful. And there are things that they could have done, that Facebook could have done to prevent causing pain on a daily basis. First of all, allowing for people to dismiss it. So if you did not want to see it, there was no X option. Now there is one. So someone would see a picture that would force pain on them, and the next day they would come back and it would be there again at the top of their feed for a month. So it is important to always respect the user's decision, even if you know best. Let them do the mistake. Another way that design can be cruel is by using symbols and emotions that lack emotional intelligence. So when Whitney Houston died, I was sad. So I went on Facebook and wrote something like that I will not sing for you. You can sing in your head. And of course, I did not mention Whitney Houston. To me, this is very clear that I'm referring to this. But my dad didn't know, so he called me, and really caring about me, like, how are you? Are you still with your boyfriend? Yeah, why are you asking? It's like, because you look really sad, and you said that you would always love them. And I was like, that's actually really cute of my dad to care. So while I appreciate and concern, I can't help but notice the lack of emotional intelligence that Facebook provided in that situation. Why is this important? That's because your brain no longer knows the difference between emoticons and emotions. So there's some research that have been made, and you can see here, they showed, they showed like a smiling face and an actual smiling face, so smiley face, to people, and they looked at the brain, what happened in their brain, and they see the exact same type of reactions to these 2 symbols, but not to the, I'm not even sure what that is. How do you call that? A wheel?
Yeah, ship steering wheel.
Ship steering wheel, that's gonna be it. So they actually are reacting exactly the same way. Because our brain now makes these shortcuts, it's important that we are very careful when we use them. The problem with big platforms like Facebook, suggesting only a single type of happiness, is that it reduces the possibility of emotions to like 5 or 6 different ones and quite simplistic emojis. By diminishing the spectrum of reactions, it removes the possibility of humor, sarcasm, compassion. There's a spectrum of reactions, and this is not a spectrum of reaction in my opinion. It renders empathy just a mere click away. So for example, a friend announces that she finally is feeling better after a week. You go for yay. Later, she announces that she finally got the job that she had been interviewing for and wanted forever at Shopify. We're hiring. What do you answer? Yay? And then a week later, she announces that she's pregnant. What do? Extra, yeah, like you get that? Like there's nothing else you can do except writing, but we all know that with reactions, people do react more than they write. I'm not saying that this is bad per se. I'm not saying Facebook is trying to manipulate your emotions. Maybe they are, I don't know. But that's not the point. I'm just saying that we have to be careful when we use these reactions and offer them as the unique choice the user has. When you read happiness on a face, there are dozens of micro-expressions that add depth to this feeling. When you use words, you can add adjectives, synonyms, metaphors, nuances, context. It all helps your reaction. But when your only option is a smiley face, what do? Talking of likes, Facebook is definitely not the only one using icons. So at one point, I received a notification from LinkedIn, and if you listen to what I said, I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn. LinkedIn's notification system, for sure. So I had to thumbs down it in order for it to go in my spam folder. Kind of feels okay because I do dislike this email, so I'm like, cool, okay, send it over. But the other day I was looking for my credit card statement and I couldn't find it. It was in my spam folder, so I had to thumbs up my credit card statement for it to not go in my spam folder. Which is weird because I do not like my credit card statement. There is a clear disconnect on the action that I was required to press on and the actual emotion that I felt towards the content that I was touching. But it's just an icon, right? How important are these symbols anyway? Do they really influence what we do? Someone was taking a picture. Go ahead. Done? So when Airbnb changed its rating system from stars to hearts, it increases the conversion of 30% of people adding stuff to their wish list. That's massive. And the only change was starring it or putting a heart on it. There's a really good research paper on this, by the way. So you have to wonder, is the word or icon on the button really reflecting what the user is experiencing? So another way that design can be cruel is by forgetting the 10%, the edge case. A colleague of mine recently had a very cruel encounter with design, and she allowed me to tell you the story today, so I'm not stealing that story from her. So one day she received a call when she was at the office, and her sister that had been battling cancer for a long time was really not doing well, and the doctor told her that she had to go to the hospital like right now. She lives in Ottawa, and her sister lives in Toronto. So for those of you that are not Canadians, that's like a 5-hour drive there. It's 450 kilometers or 280 miles. Localizing my content. So that's like 5-hour drive there. While she was on her way, she received a call from her sister that was on FaceTime, and she was calling her friends and family members to say goodbye. And that thought alone sort of blows my mind. Like when she was telling me that story, I had shivers. I still do, actually. My colleague actually told me, I am grateful that technology has evolved so that I was able to have those critical moments through this small device in my pocket. A couple of years back, she would not have been able to say goodbye to her sister. That's powerful. However, while she was on the phone with her sister, the phone call was cut short, and these error messages kept popping up. I remember when FaceTime launched. There was a beautiful commercial showing happy friends calling another happy friend. What would this look like if stress and emotions ran high? Now, I'm not blaming FaceTime or Apple or whatever for creating this technology whatsoever. I think it's a powerful, important technology that is actually really well designed for the most part. Take a moment to reflect on the most important phone call of your life. What was it? Were you announcing to your parents that you were getting married, that you were pregnant? Did you ask your wife to marry you while you were deployed? Or was it a friend in a car accident asking for help? And now imagine that phone call getting cut short. Not available for FaceTime, what does that mean? Is there a connection issue? Do you have to change your settings? You're stuck on this side of the screen with the other person on the other side not understanding what's happening, and you don't know what to do. It's in these moments that you realize that this screen there, this is design. We have to think about these edge cases or these problem situations because they matter when we don't think about it. Always think about edge cases. Write clear error instructions. That's vital and important. Step 5, not to kill people. You have to learn about emotions. So how do you build empathy with your team when you don't have enough time to care about all the small details? Like, we could argue that over the production and creation of FaceTime, this was like in the corner of the information architecture. And they probably just didn't have time to spend there. Or it was an oversight. You have to build empathy with your team. And in order to do that, you need to teach them about emotions. Knowing about emotion is not a soft skill. I think I'm going to kill someone next time I hear soft skill. I really hate that word. So our brains can be analytical and empathetic, but not at the same time. So if we want to create empathy towards our user, it's important not to overwhelm our brains during presentation with both data and stories. You need to alternate between the two. So create 2 parts with your design findings. Start with the quantitative finding, the amount of tickets of customer service, results to Likert scales, conversion numbers, time to completion, cost-benefit analysis. Then present the qualitative data. Here's a way to present qualitative data. This is a Bloq wheel of emotions, and it's a really nice representation of different human emotions. I find it very useful, and what I do is that whenever I do user testing, I ask participants to tell me how they feel on that wheel. If you were to ask someone how they feel, they tend to not have a really great understanding of all the different emotions that they could be feeling at that exact moment. So saying to your stakeholders that 4 participants felt anger or angry is one thing. But saying that 1 was angry, 1 was enraged, 1 was loathing the experience, that's way more powerful. So learn about the different emotions. Learn to name them. And the Bloq wheel of design is just one model. There are a lot of them. I think there are like 10 or 12 different models that I've seen, and I like this one because it's quite simple. So design can be hostile, it can be cruel, but it can also be deadly. And I mean deadly not in the sense that next time you see someone using Comic Sans, a kitten might die. We don't want kitten dying. It might actually kill people. So in our office building, we used to have a page that would explain the emergency procedures. In it, you don't have to read it. It would tell you that the alarm has 2 stages. One is you need to get ready, but you don't need to exit the building. It might be a false alarm, or it might be we're not sure. Just gather your stuff. The second stage means get the fuck out. So we're gonna play a little game. I'm gonna play one of the 2 stages, and you have to tell me if you should exit the building or if you just gather your computer and stuff to make sure it's not getting stolen and all that, okay? So is this, you stay here, or you have to go? If you have to go, you raise your hand. Everyone else, you died. So this is really bad sound design. And when you think about it, the idea of having 2 levels of alarms is actually quite clever, but you have no way of comparing them. Specifically not when it's written. Look for 3 tones with one, like, no. So that's a good example of a good idea, badly designed, and with bad instructions that follow it. Here's another example. In 2007, I was traveling across Central America with my best friend, Fred, and we were discovering the world and its beauties. So in our quest to find all the hidden gem on a shoestring, we went to this beautiful hotel that is actually on Pilotes. It's actually on the water. So to get there, you have to take a 15-minute boat ride. The next morning, my friend Fred had some cereals, and he's allergic to nuts. Obviously, it contains some nuts. Thankfully, he always traveled with his injector, and I knew exactly where it was, so I ran for his injector, gave him. But what I didn't know is that once the allergic reaction starts, you cannot inject yourself. Your hands start spasming. But he always told me that he had to be the one injecting himself. So I never cared about it. I never learned about using this injector. All I remember is like a really, really old class when I was like 12 years old where you would learn about this and they would show you in oranges. I don't know if you've seen that. A leg is not an orange at all. So he handed me the tube and I gave him the injection. And it was not an EpiPen, it was one that had 2 injections in it. So the first injections that you give gives you 10 minutes to go to the hospital, and then you have a second one, like a second chance of getting there. So I gave him the first, and 10 really, really long minutes after that, I'm on a boat that is going ridiculously fast, and I'm trying to give him a second injection. And I can't make it work. I'm struggling. I'm trying to make this little thing work, and it just doesn't. So imagine the scene. We're going ridiculously fast on a boat. The wind is literally whipping my hair in my face. There are 2 tourists on the boat that didn't realize what was going on and jumped on that board with us to go to the city, and they're crying and freaking out. The boat captain or driver is screaming at me in Spanish, and I'm trying to stay calm and figure this thing out. And at one point, my friend asked one of the tourists to hold his hand. So I resigned myself to read the instructions. I don't like instructions. Those were glued around the tube, and I had to unglue the thing. It was like a very long piece of paper with 14 steps. And on step 9, it said, slide the orange color of the plunger. I remember feeling so mad at myself, not being able to understand what they were instructing me to do. I've studied industrial design in plastic injection molding. I should know what a collar, what a plunger is, but I didn't. So, freaking out, I ended up stabbing my friend in the thigh 11 times. And the thing broke in his leg. And somehow that's how I saved his life. It somehow worked out of rage. If I had wanted to save lives, I would have chosen a different career path. I would have become a nurse, a doctor maybe, paramedic, police officer. At least that's what I thought before that day. Before I understood the power of design and realize the cost of bad design. So thankfully, we made it on time. Fred is perfectly fine today. That's the next day. I added that picture because the first time I gave that talk, it wasn't there. And the first question I had was like, is he alive? I was like, he made it. Sorry. I could tell something was wrong. No one was listening to me. They were like, oh. Alive, happy. But it could have gone wrong, really, really, really wrong. And I know now because I went on YouTube and looked for it, that all I had to do was to pop that little thing out. But I couldn't find the orange color, maybe because it was yellow. Maybe because the instruction was written so small on a piece of paper that it was like dingling in the wind. Maybe because I was stressed, because maybe you're not supposed to be able to know how to do this thing when your friend is dying in your hands. Do you know of anyone that would have to give an injection in a nice, peaceful situation? How did they test this? Please come in. Feel comfortable. Would you like coffee? Sorry, you're allergic to coffee. Sit down, use the injector. No, that's not real life. I'm not saying that we should kill people when we're trying to test things. However, it might be a good idea to consider creating some sort of stress when you're testing something. So what can we do to be more conscious about not making these bad design decisions? One very important thing is to start writing clear error messages. Make sure you include any necessary steps, troubleshooting information up front. Don't withhold any useful information. So if it could be yellow or orange, do put these two colors. And always include the next steps. Make sure your instructions are readable. Test with different emotional states. It's really hard to test for panic mode, I get it. You definitely don't want your participant panicking when you're testing something with them. But what if you could create some sort of stress by offering a reward if they can complete a task in less than 3 minutes, for example? A task that you know should take a little bit over that. This might be just enough to see how they react when they don't have time to do everything. Gather your team and ask, what's the worst that could happen with what we're building? It can actually turn into a really fun brainstorming session. We make it sort of a game where whenever we launch a new feature, we brainstorm and we ask, how can this go wrong? And we try to be very creative, which is equally dark and fun. But at the end, we know what safeguards we should put in place for this thing not to kill anyone. So usually when you build something, the features that make it in production or in V1 is the features that are used all of the time by all of the people. And then it goes down. But features that might kill people are usually in the dark purple area. So if by asking the question, could it kill someone? The answer is yes, just one person, maybe if they use it in a really weird way. Well, maybe you should prioritize this. Here's an example. When you search something on Tumblr that is related to sadness, suicide, or anorexia, or other eating disorders, instead of giving you results directly, it will offer help first. So this is a really great example of making it a couple of clicks longer for everyone in order to save just a couple of people. So humans are complex, with a capability of feeling a multitude of emotions. And designing with empathy is sort of a trendy thing. But what does that mean? What emotions are we really designing for? As designers, developers, product creators, we selectively choose what emotion we are designing for. Step number 9 is to be responsible for the work you put into this world, because no one else is accountable for your work. Engineers in Canada, and also in the States, as I've been told, they have a ritual of receiving an iron ring that they wear on the pinky finger upon graduating. You guys know the story behind that ring? So in the 1900s, there was the Quebec Bridge construction, which is close from home. And during the construction, the bridge collapsed, killing 75 people. The collapse was due to an error of judgment from the engineering, the collapse was due to an error of judgment by the engineering that designed the bridge. So there's a myth that the first rings were made out of the scraps of the bridge that collapsed and killed people. The ring is real. The myth is that it was made from iron. And it symbolizes humility. And it serves as a reminder that engineers have a responsibility towards the public. So today, my ask to you is to find your ring. What will remind you every day of your responsibility towards the public? Thank you.